lot of irresponsibility across the board. Again, the housing bubble, that was huge. Quite frankly, a lot of people were able to buy houses that shouldn't have been able to buy houses. So I think to the large degree, the laws were intact, but guess what? People found how to get around them. That didn't help us, okay? One thing that a lot of people are, Larry mentioned, the war on terror. I've been in both combat theaters. It's ill-defined, okay? If you look at the numbers, somewhere between 1.4 to $5 trillion we've spent. Okay, that's a lot of money. Having been to Iraq and Afghanistan, I can't really tell you what we've accomplished. So you've got this war on terror, you've got financial markets melting down globally, not just here. And in the United States, we had a lot of irresponsibility. Going back to the housing bubble, I don't just want to blame one sector, but there are laws in place. There are things that have checks and balances. Again, not to beat up any one industry, but the financial industry, guess what? Those high-priced and high-placed attorneys that work for banks or for banks on Wall Street, they found a way to get around the regulations. Okay? So we've got to keep everybody accountable, and quite frankly, you know, it's hard to say what one or two things created, but the bottom line is we're in this right now, where we're at. We've got to tighten our belts. Everybody's got to take a responsibility and figure out how to move forward. And quite frankly, it's probably going to be with less regulation, looking at the tax structure and moving forward.
Thank you.
To the initial question, that the problem wasn't necessarily, in my view, the rush to deregulation, as David described it. It was the belief by many, and it bore out that we were going to have this this too big to fail concept, and the government was going to bail all these risk takers out. That's the concept that causes this problem. I don't believe that overregulation is the answer. I think that personal responsibility, and I think it's great when companies take risks and do innovative things, but then they have to bear the brunt of the failure if they happen to fail, and then reap the rewards of their success if they succeed. I promised David that I would agree with him on something, and I will, on the education system. I was recently at a forum, or at a group with Condoleezza Rice, and she was asked what kept her up at night. And you know, she could have said, you know, the situation in Iran or any other number of international challenges that we face, and she said it's our failure in K through 12 education. So I agree with him. We need to figure out a way to make our education K through 12 much more robust and energetic and local, bring it back to a local level so creative ideas can bear fruit and not have it controlled bureaucratically in Washington.
Thank you. I love that we've managed to talk about the war and education and but keeping it thematically connected to the gist of the event. The original question was, how did we get in this mess? What caused what some people call now the Great Recession? And what would you say is the single most important thing to do to get us out of this mess?
The Great Recession is something that our business, inspecting homes, saw and continues to see up close and personal. I marvel at the aspect of the klaxon ringing in the George W. Bush era about Fannie and Freddie being flawed, and that warning going ignored. And then we saw the spin-up to all of these homes being lost. We would go into homes that were absolutely trashed. Why? Because renters were being evicted through no fault of their own because the owner of the home couldn't avoid foreclosure. And this was devastating. And now we have a cycle where there are so many buyers for homes here in this area that the prices are starting to climb again. But the malaise in our economy has not been cured yet. And we have a sputtering recovery. I submit to you that it's in spite of the government. It's not because of the government. And to quote Andre here a second ago when he said, quote, government's role is to put more money in our pockets, that is not government's role. Government's role is to protect our individual rights and freedom.
Thank you, Wendy. I love sports, and I love watching baseball during the World Series, and that's the only time that I do watch it. And the one thing that I do notice is that the team that has the best pitchers with the lowest ERA, they generally win. And what's going on in America, when you take that analogy and you put us against other countries, our ERA as far as taxes are concerned is so sky high. Other countries are competing a lot better than we are. Jobs have left America, and this is the third answer, and I keep coming back to the same theme, is that it's about jobs, it's about job creation, and the government, their role is not to create jobs, but to provide a stable environment where small business and the American people can create jobs. And right now, folks, all the jobs, they're leaving America. I keep saying this over and over again, and they're leaving because if you are a CEO and you're looking at the bottom line, you are going to go to where it is the most competitive. And we must do a better job of saying to our small businesses that we will create an environment where the tax structure is competitive abroad, and also, once again, that we have a regulatory system that will not stifle growth, but will promote growth.
How did we get here and how do we fix it? You know, I'll never forget in 2004, I walked into my bank and I said, I'd like to get a home equity line of credit. And I signed some documents, and by the time I got home and logged into my account, I had a $65,000 home equity line based upon the assumption that my home value was going to increase that much. Careless lending caused this crisis, brought on, quite honestly, as a result of reckless federal policy that drove lenders to lend to people who could not pay it back, and also made it easier to gain access to credit. And people went out and bought cars and you know, paid off their credit cards and then ran them up again, and it makes no sense. We have a fault in our monetary policy in this country. We're printing money faster than we can bring it in. And you know, it's going to come down to fixing it is going to be tough choices. This is why I signed the cut, cap, and balance pledge. Force the federal government to live within its means. If you make $50,000 a year at home, I'm guessing you don't spend more than $50,000 a year. That's what we need to be doing in Washington. It's quite simple. But, you know, we have to elect officials who are willing to go back there and make some tough choices and do what's right for the nation as a whole.
So, Affordable Care Act, I've opposed it. What we said early on, if the Supreme Court rules it's not unconstitutional, which they did, we still can't afford it. It was sold very quickly. Should Americans have affordable health care? Absolutely. Let's just start there. But the way this came into being, it was sold very quickly. Most members of Congress, including our own friend Harry Mitchell, probably lost a job because of that. They didn't read it. They didn't read it. Okay? So it wasn't a tax. They argued it was a tax from the Supreme Court. Okay, that's all history now. Bottom line is it's supposed to be 800 and some billion. It's over twice that now. We don't know what it's going to cost. Should we have affordable health care? Absolutely. But that's not the answer. Never talked about tort reform. The increase of malpractice lawsuits without tort reform. How do you do that? Okay, there's no portability. We can't buy insurance across state lines. You can buy car insurance across state lines, but not health care. It doesn't work. There aren't enough free market solutions to something this important to make it work. It needs to be done over. The bottom line is it's an American problem. It's not just a Democrat or Republican problem. We've got to look at this thing. But unless it has free market principles plugged into this important legislation that's overarching, it's not going to work and we can't afford it.
Thank you, and I appreciate the keeping it within the context of jobs and economy.
So as a cancer survivor, I certainly appreciate some of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act. If I didn't have a job today and I was trying to get health coverage in the open market, I wouldn't be able to get it. Simply would not qualify. And it's unfair that as someone who did nothing wrong, I didn't smoke, I didn't, not you know, obviously it's a personal decision, but I didn't do anything to cause my cancer. It was a 1 in a billion thing. I was born with cancer. Should I be uninsurable for the rest of my life because of free market principles? It's my belief that people should have access to affordable health care, and it's my belief that businesses should be able to cover their employees with affordable access to care. And the problem right now is that yes, costs have gone up for health insurance, but guess what else has gone up? Profits for health insurance companies. One of the provisions of healthcare reform is the cost ratio provision. And what a lot of people are going to see is that in the coming months, you're going to be getting checks back from your health insurance company as an individual or as a business because they violated the cost ratio provisions of the Affordable Care Act. And so I think there are some positive components. Now, certainly going forward, we have to bend down the cost curve. We have to continue to do that. And that's something that I will certainly work towards in Congress.
I am someone who would go to Washington and immediately repeal the Affordable Care Act, and the reason is because I believe that anytime you have government involvement in such a large sector of the economy, it creates a distortion, and that's what causes prices to rise. And I think that the day that the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Constitution or constitutionality of Obamacare, the benefit went to pharmaceutical companies whose stock prices went immediately way up because they stand to benefit. So, you know, this is government deciding winners and losers in a marketplace, and I don't think that's the way to go. I think that there are market disciplines that we can apply to healthcare once we repeal it, allowing people to benefit, individuals benefit the same way as business do in the purchase of insurance plans, allowing people to purchase plans across lines, and those market disciplines will allow prices to come down rather than injecting government mandates and forcing people into violating their conscience and other issues that have plagued this entire act from the get-go. So I think I would absolutely scrap it and set to finding some market solutions.
Thank you.
I think the emperor has no clothes. I don't think it's about health care. I think it's about a governmental takeover of 1/6 of our GDP. And I can tell you that as a healthcare clinician herself. I was a psychiatric social worker who practiced in a mental health clinic for 3 years in the Air Force. And I am a user of the Veterans Administration system. And if you want the model of the VA for the whole country, I think you need to think twice. This is not about health care. That's great that people who otherwise weren't getting breast cancer screenings can now get that, or pap smears, or those kinds of services. But there was a much more economical way to have gone about that than to have instituted the Obamacare tax, which is what the Supreme Court called it. So in conclusion, as a small business owner, I want portability of my policy. I want to be able to band together with other businesses and have pools of insurance. I want to be able to purchase across state lines. And I want to incentivize good behavior for health choices. What do all of those speak to? The big C word, competition.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. I'll first tie it into, as far as small business is concerned, never before in American history have we told a business that if you hire more than 50 employees and they work more than 39 hours per week that you will be penalized. And when the CBO first analyzed the Affordable Oxymoron Healthcare Act, they said that it's going to cost roughly $900 billion. 1 year later, it's $1.72 trillion. Who pays for it? Future generations. Now, my wife, she was diagnosed with 3rd-stage breast cancer, and we lost our coverage, and we lost it because we paid more than most people did in a mortgage. So we bought basically catastrophic coverage. We went to the doctor, and the doctor said, you need this test, and this test. And I said, well, doc, we have to pay for this. And so he goes, well, you really don't need this one and this one. So I said, why didn't you prescribe it? He said, I would be sued if I didn't. So doctors are practicing defensive medicine, and we have to get away from that. The one thing, as an attorney, I will tell you, I'll be the first one to say that before we can talk about healthcare reform, we must talk about tort reform. That is the #1 issue. And portability is very important. we've heard it over and over again. If you move from Virginia and you move to Arizona, guess what? You can take your car insurance with you. You can't do that with your health care coverage. So as much as I believe that we must repeal Obamacare, we must replace it with private sector initiatives.
You know, healthcare now, because of what we've seen in the last year, is no longer what it used to be. It's a tax. And healthcare is not a right, and I can prove that by opening up this book and having a 5-minute conversation with you. Or that one. Mine looks.
I have no flash.
There you go. And there's been some great ideas. I'm not going to restate them. Everybody up here has said something that makes sense. Pre-existing conditions, absolutely. That was a good part of Obamacare, or the Affordable Health Care Act. There's some good ideas behind the state exchanges. But the other 2,700 plus pages have nothing to do with health care. And the reality of it is, if you want to drive costs down, you increase the size of the pool. That's what the mandate was trying to do. Force more people into it so that the insurance companies could lower costs. Ask any healthcare professional, ask any insurer. That's the goal. And if you want to do that, make it a consumer-based product and not a corporate or a government-based product. At my company, we offer it to our employees. When I pay that insurance premium for the employee in full, I write that off as an expense. Why shouldn't everyone in this room have that same right and privilege to be able to buy health care and say it's $300 a month is your premium, and write that off your income tax? Write that off your personal taxes at the end of the year. It would incentivize more people to go out and do the right thing and buy health care. And my time has expired.